Welcome to our Lift Church family gathering. We are so excited that you're joining us today on this beautiful day. So my name is Sophia Paquette, and I serve as the Director of Regional Operations, and I will be chatting with you on Discord throughout today's livecast. And so if you're not already on, hop onto the livecast webcast chat channel on Discord and post your favorite meme, and I'm excited to see those in just a little bit. But if you're joining us for the first time, welcome. We are so excited that you're here. We are a discipleship movement that wants to see people made fully alive in the hope of Jesus. And we do that through our simple churches. And that's what they are. They're just smaller churches. And so they are people made up of ordinary people who are excited to see the good news spread to their worlds and excited to bring the gospel to those around them. So let's stand and prepare our hearts as we worship Jesus together wherever you are.
Welcome to church. Why don't we stand up wherever we are and let's worship Jesus together.
When the weight of life begins to fall, on the name of Jesus I will call. For I know my God is in control, and His purpose is unshakable. It doesn't matter what I feel, it doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be in your promises to me. And now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. Yeah. As I walk into the days to come, I will not forget what you have done. For you have supplied my every need, and your presence is enough for me. Yeah. It doesn't matter what I feel, it doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be in your promises to me. And now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. It doesn't matter what I feel, it doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be in your promises to me. And now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be in your promises to me. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans you made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans you made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than You will always be more than enough for me. You will always be more than enough for me. Nothing's gonna stop the plans you made. Nothing's gonna take your love away. You will always be more than enough for me. Doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be your promises to me. Doesn't matter what I feel, doesn't matter what I see, my hope will always be your promises to me. Now I'm casting out all fear, for your love has set me free. My hope will always be your promises to me.
So this next song we're going to sing, it's called Fully Alive. And it was actually written by the worship teams collectively across our church. And it was written out of Psalm 40, which is a psalm that the name of our church comes from. And I wanted to read Psalm 40 today, but I just wanted to talk about this song and where it came from. It actually came out of our creative nights where we as a team got together to pray and to play music together and just to ask God what he had to say to our church and what it was that he wanted us to sing back to him. And so out of that came the song Fully Alive. And we don't just write music to glorify ourselves or to just write a song for the sake of writing a song, but it's actually to glorify Jesus and to bring it all back to him and to ask him how we can use the gifts that we have as a church in order to use our voices to glorify him. And so I just wanted to read Psalm 40 today. I waited patiently for the Lord, and he turned to me and heard my cry for help. He brought me up from a desolate pit out of the muddy clay and set my feet on a rock, making my steps secure. He put a new song in my mouth, a hymn of praise to our God. Many will see and fear, and they will trust in the Lord. How happy is anyone who puts his trust in the Lord and has not turned to the proud or to those who run after lies. Lord, my God, you have done many things, your wondrous works and your plans for us. None can compare with you. If I were to report and speak of them, they are more than can be told. So, church, the heart of our church and the vision of our church is to see people made fully alive in the hope of Jesus, and that's where the heart of this song comes from. It comes from Psalm 40, where it says that we waited patiently for the Lord and he's lifted us up out of that miry clay. And so I encourage you to just sing along and to proclaim his goodness with us. And, this has been happening in our church already. People have already been spending time, worshiping God in their own ways and being creative. And whether you write poetry or you write music or you just have a specific verse or word from the Lord on your heart, I just encourage you to share that with your simple church leader, share it in the music group on Discord, share it with your friends in the church so that we can come together and write music and just respond to God and respond to his goodness and to his glory. And so, I just encourage you to sing along with us.
Steady me in the fire and the flood. You
made fully alive. Your beautiful grace covers me. You are Lord. You are good. You are faithful. There are not enough words to proclaim who you are, who you've been. I will sing of how great is your name. You came out of that grave, so I rise. You have lifted me out of my sin. Oh, in hope I'm made fully alive. Your beautiful grace covers me. You came out of that grave, so I rise. You have lifted me out of my sin. Oh, in hope I'm made fully alive. Your beautiful grace covers me. You are Lord. Jesus.
And I will sing till the whole world knows that the Lord has set me free. For he is good and his love endures. His name is victory. Oh, I will sing till the whole world knows that the Lord has set me free. For he is good and his love endures. His name is victory. Oh, I will sing till the whole world knows that the Lord has set me free. For he is good and his love endures. His name is victory.
You came out of that grave, so I rise. You have lifted me out of my sin. Oh, in hope I'm made fully alive. Your beautiful grace covers me. You came out of that grave, so I rise. You have lifted me out of my sin. Oh, in hope I'm made fully alive. Your beautiful grace covers me. You are Lord.
'cause I am a child of God. From my mother's womb, you have chosen me. Your love has called my name, and I've been born again into your family. Your blood flows through my veins, and I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. Yeah, I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God. And I am surrounded by the arms of the Father, and I am surrounded by songs of deliverance. We've been liberated from our bondage, and we're the sons and the daughters. Let us sing our freedom. Whoa, 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 whoa. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. I am a child of God. You split the sea so I could walk right through it. My fears were drowned in perfect love. You rescued me so I could stand and sing. And I am a child of God. 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 And I'm no longer a slave to fear, and I am a child of God. And I'm no longer a slave to fear, 'cause I am a child of God.
God, we just thank you for your goodness and faithfulness, Lord. And that we no longer have a reason to fear, Lord, because you have brought us out of that pit of despair. That you've lifted us up out of our sin, Lord, and you've set us on solid rock. And we just thank you that we are your children. Jesus, you are so good, and I just pray that you would continue to reveal your goodness and faithfulness to us. We thank you, Jesus. Amen.
Amen. What an incredible time of worship as we even featured a new song that's been written by our church family. And I'm just going to kind of pivot things into a time of giving. So if you've been following along with us in the past couple of weeks, we've been working through 1 Peter. So in 1 Peter chapter 1 verse 4, we are specifically told that we have an inheritance that is unperishable, undefiled, and unfading. And this is because that Jesus died for us. And so sometimes we think that we have to hold on to our earthly gifts so tightly, but we have such a great and magnificent inheritance from God waiting for us in heaven. And sometimes we believe that we need to hold on to our finances so tight because we think it's ours, but ultimately it's what God has given and provided for us. And so what we have in heaven far outweighs anything that we have here on earth. And when we give to the church family, church body, we are saying that we are so excited to see more people made fully alive in the hope of Jesus. And so this is not anything that we have earned, but this is just a way to give thanks to God and give glory to God as well. So giving is an act of worship. And if you're ready to give, here are some instructions on how you can give today.
Here are some instructions on how to give in your simple church families. You can give online at liftchurch.ca/give. You can text GIVE, the amount, and your simple church region to 1-844-992-1420. For example, that could be Give 50 Mohawk. You can set up automatic bank withdrawals by going to engage.liftchurch.ca and downloading the automatic giving form from Discipleship Resources. Be sure to select your Simple Church region from the drop-down menus when you're setting up your giving. Thanks for helping us see more people be made fully alive in the hope of Jesus.
Okay, so at Live Church, each and every week, we have so many incredible things to share because God is moving and shaking within our church. So first off, I want to just celebrate and encourage all of our Simple Church leaders who are doing a tremendous job, they're doing a tremendous job engaging in their Simple Church, making sure their Simple Church is being formed by God's word, and they're continually to be family during this time. And we also have incredible Simple Church apprentices who are stepping up, who are learning, who are growing in their leadership. And so many of them are being sent to start their own Simple Churches because they are humbly inviting others to know who Jesus is. So thank you guys so much for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. And I am so excited to see all of our new Simple Church apprentices rising up, taking the stand to invite other people to know Jesus. Okay, so tonight at 6:30, so mark that on your phones right now, at 6:30, you're going to see some of our incredible Simple Church leaders and apprentices and others within our church help celebrate our graduates tonight. So a lot of our graduates aren't able to cross that stage for their convocations, but we are going to celebrate the heck out of them. So grab your party hats, put on your celebration pants, and let's celebrate our graduates tonight. So join us here on the YouTube channel at 6:30. And for other information on what's happening, head over to engage.liftchurch.ca. And so we'll be right back. We're actually going to share with you a little bit of what's happening later tonight.
Hey, I'm Levi, and I'm going to be hosting the graduation ceremony tonight. So without further ado, here are some sneak peeks to the celebration tonight.
I just wanted to take a second and celebrate 3 women from our Simple Church who are graduating from the University of Guelph this year. Vicky, Diana, and Erin. We love you so much. You're so precious, and we're praying for you always.
Hi church, Allie here, just coming on to celebrate my girl Rachel Brown. She's graduated with a Bachelor of Sciences in Astrophysics and a minor in Earth Sciences. So congratulations, Rachel!
Good afternoon, church. First off, thank you to Dan, Paula, and really the entire worship team for bringing that moment of worship. That was just so encouraging for me to see. And I know that there are so many people that helped make that happen. This really came out of our church family. And so I just want to reaffirm what Paula said. If God has been moving in your heart, if you're listening and you're part of the church family and you feel like there's some songs in your heart, bring them forward. Let's continue to write. I think worship is always the most powerful when it originates from the church body. And so I sometimes say I'm tired of singing other people's songs. God is doing work in our church. And so I'm so encouraged that we are bringing forward our own heart of worship. So thank you to Dan and Paula for kind of being the face on that, and but also to everybody behind the scenes that helped make that happen. And so excited because I know there's some other stuff in the works. That said, I do have a bit of an announcement to bring to you, or some communication around what's happening as we continue to navigate COVID-19. I know that many of you are wondering what our future will look like as a church family, especially given the ever-changing environment that we live in. And while it is true that that situation and the recommendations and the policies are constantly changing, we can still, as a church family, make a number of concrete commitments. And so before I get to those, I first want to thank all of you as a church family. You have done an incredible job. Your resilience, your tenacity, your creativity, and your commitment to honoring Jesus, serving the vulnerable, and living on mission has just been totally encouraging to me over these last number of weeks. Church, you are amazing. That said, based on the current communications from Ontario Public Health, as well as observing what's happening on our university campuses, and as we look into the future, there's a number of kind of conclusions that we're able to come to. Now, we can't predict the future, but looking into the future, I want to share 4 things that we anticipate being our reality moving forward, as well as how we're going to respond to these things. So the first thing is that we do not expect that we will be able to gather without restrictions on numbers again this year. This may not affect smaller regions, but certainly we will be required to innovate at our larger regions like McMaster. Secondly, our campuses are significantly embracing digital learning as a primary strategy. And of course, this is going to have some impacts on us in terms of the number of students and the way students engage on campus. Number 3, the need to serve and the sort of the critical needs and the most vulnerable on our campuses and in our cities will continue to grow. So the efforts we're doing to reach those will continue to be essential. And number 4, we anticipate that safety concerns will be a very real concern for people. And for many people, they're going to be hesitant to gather even if there aren't restrictions on gatherings, especially those that haven't grown up in the church. And so given these 4 sort of parameters that we anticipate we'll be living within, the question is, how do we respond? And while our future may be uncertain or may be challenging looking at those 4 things, our commitment as a church family to gospel proclamation, disciple making, and forming an Acts 2 multiplying community remains. And so here is a number of assurances or commitments that we're making as a church. The first one is that we will continue to take the necessary safety precautions and adhere to all recommendations from our government. The second one is that we are completely committed to the process of multiplying disciples through simple churches. Who we are as a simple church movement doesn't change and isn't going to change. Number 3, we are completely committed to serving the university and college campuses of our nation and multiplying disciples therein. Number 4, we are completely committed to our core value of mobilizing every disciple for multiplication. Everyone sent to multiply everything is our core value and will continue to drive and inform our decision making. Number 5, this is a really important one. We have always emphasized the importance of physical presence and intentional proximity in living on mission. And we will find ways to honor these values while adhering to the recommendations from public health. This is especially important as the restrictions may slightly lift in the coming months, that we think intentionally about what does presence look like? How do we be present in a world where gathering is more challenging? Number 6, we will continue to be creative as a church family in innovating with strategic missional engagements, the part of our simple church where we live to serve and announce the name of Jesus. Number 7, we will continue as a church to embrace collectively the identity of a servant and collectively remain committed to addressing the physical, mental, emotional, and most importantly, spiritual needs of every person that we are able to reach. And number 8, this one is an important one for those of you that are listening, especially those of you that are listening but are not currently physically located close to one of our regions. And it's this: we are proactively asking every person who is not physically present in a Lift region to seriously consider re-engaging that region, city, or campus in a physical way as soon as you are able. And this is important. We're asking you to proactively do that regardless of your university or college's decision on digital learning strategy. In other words, we're asking us as a church family to think about how do we missionally engage our campus and make a decision around that, and then ask the questions around what our university or college is doing. And so given these 8 commitments that we're making as a church, I want to share 2 things that you can expect in the coming weeks. The first is that our various leadership teams are working tirelessly to ensure that we have a really clear and phased re-engagement plan as we innovate in our regional gatherings and simple churches over the coming months. We plan to share that phased rollout plan over the next 2 weeks. And the second expectation that you can have from us, and even as specifically of me, is that you will receive clear guidelines and expectations as we navigate into the fall, specifically for simple churches, especially simple church leaders and apprentices. And we hope to share those guidelines and expectations of what does it mean to lead a simple church. I know that many of you are asking the question and trying to figure out, how do I lead? I'm kind of leading virtually. What happens when restrictions lift? We're going to be sharing some expectations and guidelines around that in the next week or so. And so you can expect some really good clarity coming from the team on those. But it's important that we hear these pieces of clarity and phased rollout plan in light of those 8 commitments that we've made as a church. And so that's what I wanted to share with you today. You'll hear more clarity on this over the next 2 weeks. I love you guys. I appreciate you guys. It is a joy for me and Laura and our family to serve in this church family. I cannot imagine a better place. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I look forward to being able to see many of you in person one day soon. That said, here is the moderately handsome Daniel Wilding bringing our reading out of Mark 7 today.
Hey, church, before we get into the sermon, let's read this week's passage. It's out of Mark 7, verse 31 to 37. Again, leaving the region of Tyre, he went by the way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee, through the region of the Decapolis. They brought to him a deaf man who had difficulty speaking and begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. So he took him away in the crowd in private. After putting his fingers in the man's ear and spitting, he touched his tongue. Looking up to the heaven, he sighed deeply and said to him, Ephphatha, that is, be opened. Immediately his ears were opened, his tongue was loosened, and he could speak clearly. He began to speak clearly. He ordered them to tell no one, but the more he ordered it, the more they proclaimed it. They were extremely astonished and said, he has done everything well. He even makes the deaf hear and the mute speak. Now let's welcome back up Robin for today's message.
Awesome. Well, before we get into the word from Mark 7, thanks, Dan, for reading that. Why don't we take a moment and pray as a church family, both over what I just shared, but also over the word that we're going to study together this afternoon. So, Jesus, thank you for your grace and your goodness. Thank you that you're building your church, God, and there's so much to celebrate. Lord, I pray that as we as we grapple with what does it mean to be the church, and as we look to the future, God, that you would give us a confidence in the call of making disciples and committing to be disciple makers and those who proclaim your name. Lord, I pray that you would increase our love of you, God, that would flow out of a love of you. And Jesus, that as we study Mark 7 this afternoon, Jesus, that you would speak clearly to us. I'm excited for what you're going to do, and I thank you for your word, Jesus. Amen. All right, well, Mark 7 is where we're going to be. I was studying this text, and something really interesting I've been thinking about a lot is this idea of catalyzing a Jesus movement. So all through the Gospels, what you see is Jesus kind of shows up on the scene. He doesn't kind of show up on the scene. He does show up on the scene. And crowds are attracted to him. They want to get close to Jesus. And I started to ask the question, who told the crowds? Like there wasn't Instagram, there wasn't YouTube, there wasn't social media. They didn't even have newspapers, right? Like, who told them? The answer is people did. People shared the word. Rumor about this Jesus was getting around, and people, as a result of those who had encountered Jesus, telling other people about Jesus, it started to spread and accumulate energy. And all of a sudden, people were clamoring to get as close to Jesus as possible. And it was so mind-bogglingly simple. We come up with all these strategies as a church. How do we launch and reach every person that comes in for Frosh Week? And yes, we're going to do that, whatever that looks like. And how do we do strategic missional engagement? And how do we do this and how do we do that? And yet in the first century, literally all they had was word of mouth, and it seemed to work pretty good. There were these Jesus movements of people that wanted to get close to Jesus. That's what I'm defining as a Jesus movement. A bunch of people that really wanted to get really close to Jesus. And it happened because there were people that had encountered Jesus that told other people about Jesus. This text that we're studying in Mark 7, it says here that, again, leaving the region of Tyre, he went by way of Sidon to the Sea of Galilee through the region of the Decapolis. And I was reading, I was like, Mark, why are you giving us all these geographic details? As I shared on the webcast on Thursday, we're doing a how to study Scripture. Every detail is important. There's nothing in Scripture that's not there for a reason. So we've got to really grapple with these details. So you go Decapolis. That's a weird word. I've heard that word before. The answer is, where did I hear that? We heard that in Mark 5. Mark 5, Jesus hilariously sails across the sea, gets out of the boat, finds this man, casts out some demons into some pigs. It's a crazy story. And then sends that man to go and tell others about Jesus. And he was the first missionary, as it were, to the Gentiles, the first person to go and tell people about Jesus in that part of the world. Now, Jesus is back in that part of the world. Now, I don't know, that doesn't tell us in the text that the crowds came because of this man. I don't think it's a stretch of the text at all to suggest that in large part it was because of this man's proclamation in Mark 5 that there's crowds to receive Jesus in Mark 7. But even if it wasn't that man, the point still applies that somebody told them. And so I started to grapple with this, like, what is it? Like, how do we as a people catalyze Jesus movements? Like, we're calling our whole church to be disciples who make disciples who make disciples. How do we do that? And so today I want to bring 5 really practical things that we all collectively need to be doing. Because you may be going, I don't know if I can lead a Jesus movement, but the answer is Jesus has commissioned you to lead a Jesus movement. Because he's put you in a place in the world where you can only reach the people you can reach. That's the best part about being a disciple. All of us have the commissioning to go and make disciples. Now we do that as a part of a larger church family. We do that together. But how do we lead Jesus movements? So number 1, leave safety. We have to leave safety. So Jesus heals this demon-possessed man in Mark chapter 5. And it says he really wanted, he begged, he pleaded. He said, Jesus, you are now my safety net. You are the one that has healed me. I want to stay with you. And yet it says Jesus did not let him, but told him, go home to your own people and report to them how much the Lord had done for you and how he has had mercy on you. So he went out and began to proclaim in the Decapolis how much Jesus had done for him, and they were all amazed. This demon-possessed man wanted to live in the place of safety, and yet Jesus wanted him to catalyze the Jesus movement. Go home and tell people. Go home and tell people. If we as a people are going to see those around us know Jesus, we have to get out of our safety net. We have to get out of our bubble. I don't mean socially distanced bubble. Don't misunderstand. I don't get hate mail here. But what I mean is we need to get out of our safety bubbles of the familiar, the comfortable, the normal, the easy, the mundane. And we need to choose to leave that and say, where can I go where there are people who do not know Jesus? This is the basic essence of living as a disciple who makes disciples of all nations. We have to go to those who don't yet know Jesus. We have to leave safety. As I said in that announcement, place is really important in the announcement just before the sermon. Place is really important, where we physically are. So often we consider where we are from things like career, things like family, things like friends, things like school. But I want us to really learn to ask the question, what does it look like to choose place on the basis of mission? To choose where we live and who we engage with and who we live with and how we live and where we live from the question of how do I use this as a platform to reach people with the gospel? Jesus has sent you into the world, if you are a follower of Jesus, as a missionary. What if we learn to think like missionaries, learn to think like this demon-possessed man? You know, church, this has been my story personally, and since I've been married, Laura and I's story, for like over and over and over again. The Lord has called us to leave safety, to trust him. Now, the crazy thing is that every time it's been scary, it's been hard, it's been difficult. I remember when I in my first year, committed to actually making Lift home. I wasn't leading Lift. I was just the first year in the church. And I really felt the Lord say, yeah, like this is home. This is really home for you. You need to invest. And I remember I was running a company in Oshawa, actually. It's a whole other story. I was running a software design, graphic design company. And I would drive back and forth every weekend for that summer. And I remember one weekend late at night, I was driving. It was probably midnight, if I recall. I was driving back from Hamilton. I'd spent the weekend in Hamilton. I had an apartment in Hamilton. And I was driving back to Oshawa, and I just remember just weeping on my way home. As I was grappling with the sense of loneliness, the confusion, not really understanding. I was like, Lord, why did you call me to do this company over here, and yet you've called me to be in this place over there, and I don't know how to understand how it all works. And I just remember saying, Lord, I don't understand. And I can remember his voice to me, as he has said to me so many times. He said, Robin, I'm just asking you to trust me. Leaving safety often requires that we step out in faith with our eyes on mission without any assurance of success at the outset. Just a cool story. I'm probably going to go long if I tell this story, but it's just too cool not to share. I have to share it. So this week, this is just leaving safety. I don't even know if this fits into my sermon, but you guys just have to hear this because it's just such a cool story. It'll fit in. I was debating whether or not to share it. I'm going to share it. And so we've got this huge grocery program going. Nicole and the International Student Ministry team, they're crushing it, working with Hamilton International students. Man, we got groceries going everywhere. The problem with running a grocery program is that it's pretty expensive. And we've been funding it as sort of it's in a bit of a contained way so that we can really track it carefully. And it came out this week that the program was running at a pretty significant deficit. And we weren't able to continue running the program on the basis of the funding we had. So we met together as a team and we said, okay, what are we going to do? And we committed that we would continue to serve. We didn't know what that meant. We didn't know what that was going to look like. We said we're probably going to have to get pretty creative, cutting costs and reducing things because we don't have the finances to keep it going, but we have to serve. God has put people in our place. We have to leave our safety net and go serve them. And so we committed to continuing to do that. And we had this big deficit. We didn't know what we were going to do. The true story, this is what happens. We hang up that Discord call. And in that moment, I think it was even like as the call was ending or just afterwards, Mel gets a call that we had received a $10,000 grant to run that program. That's just the way God works. We step out of the net and then his provision comes. We step out of the net and then his provision comes. We want it all up front. But if we're going to be people that catalyze Jesus movements, we have to get really comfortable stepping out and trusting him for his provision. Number one, we need to leave safety. Number two comes from this. It says that they brought to him, Jesus, a deaf man who had difficulty speaking, and begged Jesus to lay his hand on him. So this deaf man, he's mute, he's deaf. We're back in chapter 7 now from chapter 5. He's deaf, he's mute, he's trouble speaking. And it says that they brought him. His friends. His friends brought him to Jesus. I find this interesting because it doesn't say the man was lame. It doesn't say his legs were broken. This is not the same as the person, the paralytic who got lowered through the roof, who couldn't get his way to Jesus. This was a man who presumably could get his way to Jesus, but he didn't. His friends did it for him. Number two, to catalyze the Jesus movement, we need to learn to beg for our friends. Beg for our friends. We need to be people who look at our friends who don't know Jesus, who are not fully formed in Jesus, or who have potential that is being waiting to be unlocked for the purposes of the kingdom. We need to be able to look at that and have the faith to bring them to Jesus. We need to have the faith to see in our friends what our friends don't yet see in themselves. I'm going to say that again. We need to be a people who have the faith to see in our friends what our friends don't yet see in themselves. Church, are we coming to Jesus? Are we begging for our friends? Jesus, please move in my friend's life. Please move in my family's life. Please move in this coworker's life. Are we compelled to bring them to Jesus? We need to be a people, if we're going to catalyze Jesus movements, we need to be people that are comfortable and at home. Just say, I'm going to do whatever it takes. I'm going to get you to Jesus. Now, here's the hang up. Part of the challenge here is that if we're honest, many of us struggle to identify spiritual deafness and spiritual muteness. We struggle to be able to identify when somebody is spiritually deaf or spiritually mute. I'm going to talk about how part of that is because we ourselves can be spiritually deaf. But a lot of the time, when we look at our peers around us, we don't look at them through lenses of faith. We don't look at them through lenses of what could Jesus do if he had a hold of your whole heart. We just look at them as, well, I guess you're just my peer. But what if we learn to see those around us and those we're discipling and those in our simple church with a lens of faith according to how Jesus sees them? We wouldn't see them as weak and deaf and mute. We would see them as capable catalyzers of Jesus movements themselves. And when we see people with potential and we see it and we identify it, we are compelled to bring those people to Jesus. Church, we need to begin to pray and discern and learn to identify where people are not living into the full potential that Jesus has for them. And then have the confidence to bring them to Jesus. Not to yell at them, not to condemn them, not even to have a crucial conversation with them, but to lead them faithfully to Jesus. To come alongside them and say, I am going to bring you to Jesus. I'm going to help you see what Jesus could do in you. This means when our peers are making decisions that are self-centered, we say, actually, I want to show you what a Jesus-centric decision would look like. When we have peers or friends that are making decisions that are harmful to them, we say, actually, I think that there's a better way, a more life-giving way. We continually call people into holiness. A couple weeks ago on the webcast, I talked about how in vices, trying to overcome things like pornography and drug addiction and that sort of thing, we tend to try to implement systems to contain people or to correct people's negative behavior. But being people that see their friends with faith, that learn to beg for their friends, it means we have to not see what we're trying to correct. We have to see the health that lies on the other side. They had the faith to see that this deaf person could hear. They were aiming for hearing. They were aiming for speaking. But you see, one of the reasons that I think we struggle to call those around us who are vibrant faith, to call out that spiritual deafness, that spiritual muteness, is that we in ourselves can be spiritually deaf and mute. It's very hard to lead people to be passionate about Jesus, to catalyze Jesus movements, when we ourselves are dull, mute, deaf. And so this leads me to number 3. Get to the private place. I find it fascinating that this man's encounter happens in a private place. It doesn't happen out in public. Jesus very intentionally, it says in verse 33, it says that he took him away, like away from the crowd. He said, come with me. I'm going to take you and we're going to go have an encounter together. We're going to go spend some time together. If we're going to be people that are going to catalyze Jesus movements, we need to be people that routinely and regularly get away to that private place with Jesus. We cannot lead people to be vibrant in their faith, spiritually alive, alert and awake, if we ourselves have not spent time with Jesus. This man who was deaf and mute, others brought him to Jesus. He was not catalyzing any Jesus movement on his own. But what enabled him to be somebody that was beginning Jesus movements? For him, it was time in the private place with Jesus. You know, so often as Christians, we are trained and conditioned for the public space. We are used to coming to church for a big gathering. We get hyped. Worship's amazing. Maybe if Alex is preaching, the sermon is amazing. Maybe Dan's preaching, you're all repenting. But we get hyped on these big moments, but we haven't trained ourselves to spend time with Jesus in the private moments. Stripped away, there's no recognition, no praise, no awareness, no distractions. Nobody knows that we spent time in the private place. Nobody knows that we got alone with Jesus. Nobody knows that we did our daily devos. But there's something to be said about time with Jesus in private where he begins to speak to our souls. He begins to wake us up. He begins to open our ears, allow our mouths to speak. There's a rawness and authenticity to focused time with Jesus. And you know what the best part about time with Jesus, getting away to that private place, is that we don't come in as those who are spiritually alert. We come in to the private place. We come into the encounter with Jesus, mute and deaf. A lot of the times, I think we come to our daily devos or our time in the Word or our time with Jesus under the assumption that I've got to be spiritual enough, I've got to prepare my heart enough so that Jesus can speak to me. But what Jesus is actually saying is come as you are, as messed up, broken, confused, sinful, angry, disenfranchised. I don't know about you, sometimes Laura and I will have an argument. I know, shocking. Robin and Laura have arguments. We do. We're human. And I know that for me, after those moments of an argument or a disagreement or frustration with our kids or whatever, the last thing I want to do is go spend time with Jesus because I feel unworthy. And yet Jesus models for us and teaches us in this text that the first thing we can do is come to him. We feel unworthy, and he says, it's okay, come. Mute, deaf, I'm gonna train your heart to hear my voice. I'm gonna teach you to listen to me. Church, we cannot expect Jesus to move through us until we have allowed Jesus to move in us. We cannot expect Jesus to move in other people's lives through us until we have allowed him to have his way with us. Church, I know this is going to be mind-bending, but he has work to do on you. He has work to do on me. And in order for him to do that work, it's not going to happen in the public places. It's going to happen in the private places. So as a church, we have to get away to the private place. Get away to those daily devos. If you haven't downloaded yet, download the daily devos. Get into the word. Begin to train yourself without distractions. Jesus, what are you saying? Number 4. This is a really interesting passage. It says in verse 36, it says that he ordered them, this is the people that observed the healing, to tell no one. But the more he ordered them, the more they proclaimed it. So Jesus is healing people and he's like, okay, here's the deal, guys. I'm going to heal you, but I don't want you to tell anybody about it. And yet the more he tells them not to tell anyone, the more they tell people. Jesus is sort of a strange behavior, isn't it? It's like, Jesus, if you didn't want them to tell anyone, why did you heal them? You have to understand what Jesus is doing. Mark, the author of this gospel, is very clear that Jesus is progressively unveiling what you could call theologically the messianic secret. So he's the Messiah. He's come to bring redemption to humanity, but they don't know that yet. It's a secret. That's his real purpose, is to fulfill the messianic prophecies, to be the Messiah. But people don't understand that. They're struggling to see that. And what they see is a miracle worker. They see what almost looks like a magician. But Jesus doesn't want to be known as a magician. He doesn't want to be known as a miracle worker. Jesus' goal was neither fame nor fortune, neither power nor success. Jesus' destination was the cross. And Jesus knows that. This is so important. Jesus cares too deeply for those he is leading to be distracted by the temptation of success, because he knows where he is going, and it's to the cross. Church, here's the thing about praise. Praise is seductive. I understand this. I spend my life in front of people for the most part, either leading team meetings, speaking on camera, speaking in front of people, writing down ideas. My life is lived primarily in front of people. And I can tell you that praise is seductive. We crave it. We desire it. We long for it. We want as humans to be recognized. And church, one of the easiest ways to get off the course that Jesus has set for us, is when we begin to seek praise from people, deriving our fulfillment and affirmation from people. The truth is that we were not made to be recipients of praise. We were made to be givers of praise. The praise we receive does not sustain. Being an effective leader, you cannot do it on the basis of what people say about you or praise you for. The truth is that inevitably, and Jesus knows this, the crowds, they're not going to be wooed by miracles. Physical healing wasn't the real issue. They needed a complete transformation on a spiritual level. They needed a new soul. They needed redemption, and Jesus knows that. And so he forsakes praise. He doesn't want praise because praise is not his mission. Number 4, catalyzing a Jesus movement. We need to be people who forsake praise and celebrate others. It is so tempting, church, as leaders to begin people who crave praise. We must forsake praise. We mustn't chase it. We mustn't long for it. We mustn't ask for it. Every time we find ourselves going, why didn't somebody thank me? We need to stop and say, Jesus, I earned that pride out of my life. Because it's not about me. I am called to be a servant. It's about you. So how do we do that? We celebrate others. We celebrate others. There's this beautiful thing that happens when we begin to shift our attention off of ourselves and begin to be people who celebrate the best, who celebrate others. Celebration forces us to shift our focus from ourselves, where it so often is, onto others. So why is celebration so important? You know, as a church, we've been embracing this. For years, we've embraced this identity. We celebrate the best. We're constantly celebrating. And I know sometimes people are like, why are we always celebrating? And we put a verse up on the screen in 1 Thessalonians 5 to honor those who do good work. I mean, it's literally biblical. But sometimes it can be like, why do we always celebrate? And I want to just recognize that Matt shared a great little message on Discord this week that was really encouraging in this regard. And but we were actually, as a team, every morning we meet at 9:30. If you'd ever like to join, I suppose you could, or at 9 o'clock. And we just had Alex actually share with some of our leadership team about why we celebrate. Like, what is it about celebrating the best? And so this is straight up Alex Bush original, stealing it, and you can send royalty payments to him later. But number one, Alex was sharing with our team that celebrating the best kills pride. We so often want it for ourselves. We look to others and say, why didn't I get it, church? That's just pride. When we see other people celebrated and we feel like we are owed something, by celebrating the best in others, it actually irons that prideful spirit out of ourselves. When we celebrate the best, one of the best things we can do is to notice in somebody else something we think we do well and celebrate them for it. Is to intentionally notice and watch for in somebody else what we think we're the best at and then celebrate it. That is a great way to begin to iron out that pride. Celebrate people. So when we celebrate, it actually kills pride. It's good for us to celebrate, but it's also good for the others. When we celebrate, we're bringing to light what we see because they may not see it. We're helping people see what they do well because I can guarantee that they probably don't see it themselves. How do you identify? How do you actually start to call people into that spiritual aliveness? Well, a great way to do it is by celebrating. Sometimes we feel like, well, I'm not going to celebrate because it's obvious or insignificant. Church, it's never obvious or insignificant. Celebration is always beautiful. How many times have you had somebody say thank you and it's for something completely small and you're like, wow, that feels good. Why? It feels good to be recognized. Now, on one hand, we need to not crave it, but when we give it to others, man, we are actually affirming them and encouraging them. So it's good for us, it's good for the people we celebrate, but it's also good for the collective us, for the whole church. Church, we become what we celebrate. Why do we celebrate disciple making so much? Because we want to be a disciple making movement. Why do we celebrate multiplication? Because we want to multiply. Why do we celebrate celebrating? Because we want to celebrate. Why do we celebrate thankfulness? Because we want to be people who are thankful. We become what we celebrate. If we celebrate negativity, share what we're annoyed with, what we hate, we will become people who are annoyed and hateful. But if we celebrate what is beautiful and good, we will become people who are thankful. But this layer of we become what we celebrate actually goes deeper than just kind of a function. It actually begins to inform our identity. We become an identity of people who give praise. We are reaffirming who God made us to be, which is people who give praise, who honor one another, who celebrate one another. And that identity becomes who we are. We become people who are honoring. We become people who are celebrating. So number 4, in order to catalyze a Jesus movement, we need to forsake praise and celebrate others. We need to forsake praise like Jesus, and we need to celebrate others. Now here's the thing. Jesus tells them not to celebrate, they heal anyway. Jesus heals knowing that celebration and praise will occur. Why does he heal them? Like, if he still didn't want them to do it, why did he heal them? The question remains. The answer is actually really simple. It's because Jesus cared. I know, profound exegesis, but Jesus cares for the deaf man. And he is willing to take a risk. He is willing to actually enter into this man's pain. His compassion compels him to engage with that man's brokenness. The key to understanding Jesus in this passage is looking at how he heals. It says, after putting his fingers in the man's ears and spitting, he touched his tongue. Very weird behavior. He puts his fingers in his ears and he spits and he touches the guy's tongue, and it's very weird. What's Jesus doing? Jesus is miming. Remember, the man is deaf and mute. He can't hear Jesus. I presume Jesus didn't speak sign language. So what he's doing here is he's actually miming to the deaf man that he understands. He sees his need. And he doesn't just see his need. He actually symbolically says, your need is now in me. I take your brokenness symbolically onto myself. Jesus is entering into and engaging with this man's need. Church, Jesus was actually modeling and anticipating and looking ahead to what he would do on the cross. It says in 2 Corinthians chapter 5 that he made the one who did not know sin to be sin for us, so that we might become the righteousness of God. This is Jesus. Jesus looks at our brokenness and then actually takes our brokenness onto himself. He looks at this man's deafness and says, I'm going to take it onto symbolically myself. But what he does symbolically for the deaf man, he does in actuality on the cross. What he does symbolically in saying, I hear your deafness, he actually takes the full weight of our sin and is crucified a horrific death on a cross. Why? Because he loves you. And because he's compassionate. Number 5, in order to catalyze the Jesus movement, we need to be people that embrace powerlessness. What do I mean? The deaf man comes to Jesus and he recognizes that there's nothing he can do. He is deaf, he is mute, he is powerless, and yet Jesus takes it on. If we are going to be people who catalyze Jesus movements, we have to come to Jesus recognizing that it is only by his grace, by his goodness, by the sheer love that he has for us that we can catalyze anything. We do not come with anything to bring to the table, and yet he says, I entered into your brokenness so that you can become a participant. Just after this passage I just read in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, it says that we are ambassadors with Christ, pleading with the world, be reconciled to God. In order for us to be people who catalyze Jesus movements, we must embrace the fact that we come to Christ not powerful, but powerless. The core identity of the Christian is not one who is strong in themselves, but one who is weak and learns that Christ's strength is our strength. Church, I have been learning this, and just in a sort of a moment of honesty here, this has been the primary thing Jesus has been teaching me in this COVID-19 season. I've been obviously theologically grappling with this and looking at this from different angles over the years, but in a really new way, Jesus has been teaching me, Robin, you're not in control. You are not in control. You think you're in control, you're not in control. And he's been teaching me slowly, painfully, day by day, and I don't always get it. I'm kind of deaf and mute sometimes. That when I am powerless, and when I recognize and just say, Jesus, I am powerless, that actually creates space for Jesus to enter into my powerlessness and give me strength and joy so that I can continue to serve and do what he has put in front of me to do. Church, if you are weary and tired of trying to do things in your own strength, trying to catalyze, trying to disciple, church, I want to just invite you to embrace your powerlessness. The gospel is not a story about how we are great, but rather how Jesus enters into our brokenness. He enters into our pain. He enters into our powerlessness, and he redeems us. Let's pray. Thank you, Jesus, for this word. I pray that one of those 5 things would connect with people. Jesus, that we would be people that long for the lost to be found, that we be people who catalyze Jesus movements, that lead people to you. Lord, I pray for each person that has heard this, God, that you would begin to put people on their heart that they can lead to you. Lord, help us to understand the gospel in new ways, in new, beautiful, profound ways. We would see how much you love us. We thank you, Lord. Amen. It's just a quick reflection question before Soph comes back to close. Do you, church, believe and see yourself as someone who can catalyze a Jesus movement. Why? Why not? And what can you do about it? Soph will be back in just a second.
Thank you so much, Robin, for that word. So, as you know, our church is on a mission to see every university and college campus and their cities know the hope of Jesus. We believe that every person has a tremendous potential to bring hope into the world around them. So that is why we are a large church made up of smaller churches called simple churches. Through simple churches, ordinary believers like you and I get to be on this mission together. So in this journey of simple church, we grow in our dependence on Jesus, and we invite others to do the same as well. And so wherever you are today, we all have a next step. First, you can join a simple church. Simple church is a great way that we get to continue to grow as a family, and it's just a way that we can journey with Jesus together. Second is to enroll in 101. In this online introductory course, you'll learn what it means to be, you'll learn our mission and our values as a church. And third, become a simple church apprentice. So this is a great way that you get to continue to develop and understand how you can invite other people in your world to know Jesus. And for everything else and more, head to engage.liftchurch.ca, and that's where you can confirm your next steps today. So that's it for tonight's livecast. Be blessed, church.